This is Jay Raley with the Center for Living with Dying program of Bill Wilson Center. I'm talking with Janet Childs. Janet, thank you for being here. So Janet, just a brief overview of what goes on here at the Center for Living with Dying program.
Be glad to share with you. We actually do 3 different components to our program. We provide support, education, and intervention for people faced with a serious illness, people who are their loved ones and friends, or people that are living with grief after the death of a loved one, or any kind of loss or trauma. And how we do that is with some incredibly trained volunteers and interns that provide that support, both in groups and in individual ways. We also provide interventions in the community. So, for example, if a major incident occurs in our community, we'll be there to provide intervention support. So when you hear grief counselors on scene on the news, that's often us. And we will also work with responders and caregivers on the front lines. So, for example, if we're speaking of World AIDS Days, we're coming up for that. It's a wonderful example to talk about the way that we respond to caregivers who are in the healthcare profession dealing with this issue of HIV and AIDS, providing them with education and intervention and what we call critical incident stress management, which is crisis intervention for them. We also have our rejuvenation retreat, which is a wonderful retreat. It's an entire day of we do nothing but play and eat. And we have support groups for people living with HIV and AIDS, for their family caregivers and loved ones who are living with HIV through their loved one who is HIV positive, and then for professional caregivers dealing with this issue. And what we do is we create a safe environment to acknowledge, this is a rough disease to deal with, and what can we do to support each other and have some fun.
What is most helpful to the people that come here, you think?
I think what's most helpful is that we actually enable you to go through 4 steps to healing. One is we acknowledge your loss. Many times people, depending on the loss they're dealing with, are stigmatized. They're isolated and they're out of control. And so by acknowledging, you know what, this is a rough situation for you, we do that first step. Then we allow them to express.
It's like the grieving process.
It's like the grieving process, absolutely. And we allow them to express the details of what's hit them the hardest. And the details, because that's often what plays in our mind. So, for example, we heard at our last retreat, we heard the details of how a person got their HIV diagnosis and how it was done in a very positive, beautiful way. And then we heard from a person that was diagnosed 20 years ago how it was done in a very thoughtless and unsensitive way. So you got to see the difference that just that impact had, and being able to express the details of that created that safe environment where they no longer carried it alone inside their head, they were actually able to express it. Then the next step is that action step. And what we enable people to do is to do an action step in terms of coming to a rejuvenation retreat. We have our wonderful Light of Lights candle lighting ceremony coming up on 12/12/12.
Wow.
I have to say it's on that date. And it's a community ceremony where we light candles for people living with illness and living with grief. It's a very powerful ceremony. Everyone gets a candle at the end of the ceremony after they light it, and they can take it home and continue to light it through the winter holidays. And then our last step is celebration. And that means celebrating the building of the new normal, because it's never going to be the old normal again.
Right.
There's never going to be a way that we're going to be able to go back to the way it was before our grief incident. However, if we can build a new normal, it might have more meaning. It might be a deeper, richer life for us, actually, for having survived that incident.
What is the major, people don't generally die of HIV anymore. It's just not as dramatic as it used to be. So
exactly.
What is the major issues of facing HIV people today?
It's on all levels of, if you think about survival, right out up to what is life meaning about. So it's right down to the survival level. We're talking about, do you have the ability to work and hold down a full-time job? Are your disability payments going to be enough to keep you in a home? We're talking about basic survival needs that our HIV positive folks are dealing with. Also, they're dealing with an ongoing stigma Even though we're not dying of the disease anymore, there's still an incredible amount of stigma around HIV and AIDS.
What kind of stigma?
Well, let me explain. I have one client, beautiful, beautiful woman, that has been living with HIV for many years, who went home to her family for the holidays. And her family got separate forks, separate knives, separate. She ate out of separate dishes, and she was not allowed to contribute or participate in that family meal by making anything because it was considered unsafe.
That sounds like an education would help a lot in that
Absolutely.
case. Yeah, so at least they weren't wearing blue gloves, perhaps, you know.
Let's hope.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I might not have heard the whole story.
So tell us a little bit more about that retreat. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's fantastic. What we do is we've gotten a grant, our Center Cares grant, to put it on for 4 times a year. And it happens in January is our next one coming up. There will be one coming up in April, in July, and then in October. And it's always the 4th Friday of the month.
4th Friday of the month. Very good.
So, and it's a wonderful program, and we just spend the entire day. So in the morning we do an introduction kind of meditation with each other. Then we go off into our separate support groups. So for HIV positive, we have a Grupo en Español for people that speak Spanish primarily. It's a great group. And then we have our caregivers support group. Then we come back and have a catered lunch. And I happen to know the wonderful woman that caters the lunch, and she does it free of charge. And we have this incredible catered lunch, and then we have our art activity in the afternoon. And that can be anything. I mean, we've had art activities where we've made medicine wheels, where we've gotten in touch with, you know, what is our circle of meaning.
I don't know what a medicine wheel is.
Oh, it's so fun. That was what we did before we did the poetry therapy in our July workshop. And what we did was we just created what are our resources that we have, you know, to help sustain us and to also help give us joy in our life. And so we built actually a wheel. We had a circular, you know, kind of drawing, you know, a circular canvas thing that we did our medicine wheel on. And we just put it all on there so it's a visual reminder, these are our resources.
Nice. Janet, I think what you've done is just an amazing thing. And I you know, I look at this place as like a resource for people who are dealing with grief and HIV and things like that. So I am very highly recommending to everyone that I know that maybe they could check it out. And
please do.
This is Jay Raley at the Center for Living with Dying of the Bill Wilson Center. And I'd like to thank Janet Childs for having us interview her.
Such a pleasure, and thank you so much for what you do every day as well.
Thanks, Janet.